These controls are going to be controlled by biasing the weight between these two, as well as they're also going to be controlled by rotating these objects, so that when I rotate it, it actually moves this control back and forth around in an arc. Position constraints and orientation constraints won't get us what we want, because it'll rotate right on its spot, and that's not going to do us any good. When rotating it, the position doesn't change, so position constraint isn't going to help us if we directly constrain to this control object. Way to get around this is to create some more point helpers. I'm going to create a point helper. I'm going to change what it looks like to a cross here. And I'm just going to make sure that its orientation is aligned to world space. I built it in a left viewport, so it won't be. I'm going to create a second one. I'm going to link each point helper down to a control. So now when I rotate a control, I get a positional change on the point helper. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a couple more point helpers. Actually, I'll just make a copy of this one. Now unlink it. And I'll change the display again. This time I'll use a center marker and a box to display this one. Maybe make it a bit smaller. This sounds very confusing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these helpers to constrain to these helpers. These ones will then be directly linked to these. Again, there's a reason for this. If I directly constrain this off to something out here, say through a position constraint, it jumps and moves to it. I can use keep initial offset, but you'll find that there's issues and problems with that later on. So if I build all my control set out here, do all my constraining out here, and then just directly do some links, I can get a little bit better control over the whole thing. It's also easier to go back and tweak and fix, because I can just simply unlink the spline from the set of controls. Go about adjusting my weights and everything in my constraints, and then relink it back up again, without having to mess around with constraint systems. I'm going to need two of these. One's going to be for this one down here. One's going to be for the one at the top. Let's do this one at the top here. This control should move more with this one than it does with this one. This point here should move more with this one than it does with this one. So, starting with this object here, I'm going to constrain it. Position constrain it to the top, and I'm going to position constrain it to the bottom. Right now it's set on a 50-50 basis between the two, so it moves halfway between. What I'm going to do is I want to bias it more to the top one and try some values and see what happens. In this case, I'll try $75 to the top and only $25 to the bottom. Let's do the exact opposite on this one. I'm going to go back and I'm going to use my quad menus for the position constraints. The first one is there, second one's there, second one's going to be the top one, then it's going to be 25% on this one and 75% of the bottom. So now I have the exact opposite on this control. I can now just directly link these in to the constrained objects. This will now get me a spline that moves nice and smooth. It'll also get me one that I can rotate and bend and flex the spline with. All this I've had to do because the NURBS curves in Max are very, very slow. And if I use Spline IK or any kind of constraint systems along one, it seems to go very slow. It would be nice because NURBS curves already have some of this sort of thing built into it where you get a nice fall off. Splines, however, have the problem is that they can bend and overbend and come back if you only move one control. So this is a real nice way of controlling it. The next chapter will be setting up all of the control objects to handle the bone system itself.